using smart contracts on Polkadot, there is also this like a different, I see, approach in how data storage is being charged for smart contracts, because for Polkadot, while developing a next smart contract, you will be charged by sort of a time that you continue consuming those resources, and it stands a little in the opposition to Ethereum, where you just pay for the execution once at the call, and then it sort of happens. So it has some differences in how do you choose to pay for data storage, for computation. Yeah.
Yeah, so instead of kind of rehashing, I think you guys took most of the ways to deploy. But if you step back and kind of think about from any kind of developer standpoint, Polkadot does give you flexibility and optionality in terms of how you want to go to market. And so for Moonbeam, we focus on EVM. And so in terms of teams that have been able to come in, originally, it was really focused on teams that understood Solidity. So bring your contracts over from Ethereum or AVAX or whatever. You can deploy it into Moonbeam and seamlessly kind of get into Polkadot. And so, but we're seeing kind of this evolution of teams may want to start on Moonbeam, and then they might want to deploy to another parachain as well to do some other piece of their computation there. And so I do think that you'll continue to see this evolution of you can start with EVM, you can start with WASM as well. There are great options for that. Or you can, the ultimate kind of functionality is build your own blockchain. And so that's where Substrate really comes into play. And so you're starting to see even that evolve from, okay, I have to be a parachain and kind of do some of the more complex nuances of crowd loans and getting your own blockchain and your own validator set and things like, or collator set, to how do you make that even easier with these parathreads and some of the other teams that are building things that enable you to launch a parathread without necessarily having to run all the infrastructure behind that as well. So there's the options are almost limitless in Polkadot when it comes to deploying and building an application. It really just depends on how you feel like building it and what responsibility you want to take on versus what responsibility you kind of want to delegate to an underlying platform.
Amazing, thank you. So basically, that to sum it up, that means that Polkadot allows you a full spectrum for deployment of your decentralized applications, whether it is starting from deploying your smart contract, and that too comes with a lot of options. Like we have 3 options here itself, and then all the way going up to deploying your parachain or just connecting a parathread in the future and all that. So depending on how you want to deploy, how you want to connect your dApp to Polkadot, there are endless options and opportunities. Amazing. And just to connect it and take it one step forward, I want to understand your thoughts on what makes it different to build a dApp on Polkadot.
Do you want to go opposites this time?
Let's do that. Yes, why not?
So repeat the question one last time. So it was what makes it different building on Polkadot?
So basically, what makes building dApps on Polkadot different?
Gotcha. Well, so again, it's back to the optionality. So if you look at something like Moonbeam, it's going to look and feel very much like you're building on Ethereum or another EVM-based chain. But if you start to dig a little deeper and want to be a parachain, that's where you get that optionality. So you can speed it up. You can customize anything you want. You can keep all of the block space for yourself. And so, it just comes down to a developer deciding, okay, what do I care about long term, and what can my team, reasonably take on today? If we understand smart contracts, we're better focusing on that. Great, there's a bunch of options to deploy that. But if you're ready to take on a little bit more, and there's more responsibility, but there's also a lot more flexibility by having your own blockchain. That's where you can come in, and that's probably one of the biggest things that makes it different building on Polkadot than pretty much anywhere else, is that optionality long term.
Right, I think the best answer to the question is probably lying in the previous question, which is that there is so many options building a Polkadot. That's why it makes it so different. With Ethereum, we're trying to harness multiple different angles on building out the application layer for either other blockchains or user-facing developers, which is kind of providing a single system of interacting with multiple different palettes multiple different smart contracts and simply focusing on getting the most out of application there and thinking from the user kind of perspective, application first, and really delaying further into how technically to solve different solutions and whether it makes the most sense to bring on some specific solutions that will be using much more storage on parachains, but then perhaps run a bunch of DEXs as just smart contracts. And ideally, we would like to envision more and more solutions that would be bringing all of these kind of solutions together in like one kind of handy tools there to use.
Yeah, one other thing that I think a lot about, in addition to a lot of the flexibility that we've been talking about, is if you're building a DApp, you have to think a lot about platform risk. So if you commit to sort of building on whatever platform, you're kind of committing to that platform for a long time. And, God forbid the platform sees outages for weeks at a time or sees massive scalability problems or whatever, all of a sudden it's like you're a little bit locked. Where I think that Polkadot solves those problems in two really meaningful ways. The first way is, you like listen back to what Sean just said about all of the really thoughtful ways about which Polkadot has gone about building the protocol. And you think about a lot of the topics du jour right now between like bridging hacks, modular blockchain, scalability, et cetera, what I find really remarkable about Polkadot, frankly, is the fact that from day one, all of those decisions and all of those considerations were taken into account and really built into the protocol from day one. So the amount of foresight that has been, kind of gone into building this platform is like helps Dapps developers be inspired with confidence that this is a platform that's going to be around for a really, really long time. And so you deploy here, again, whether you deploy first on a general purpose smart contract platform and then migrate to a parachain, or you start as a parathread or whatever, you have the optionality to pick your entry point. But I think that you can rest assured that like even if that entry point doesn't serve you forever, that this is going to be something that you have flexibility with over time, but the underlying protocol and platform is built to last.
Yeah, can I want to take that a little further. I just wanted to echo what Dave just said around there are no shortcuts. And so sitting and listening to Sean in terms of the amount of foresight and building that's gone into the infrastructure that powers Polkadot as a whole, just to echo Dave's comment, like it gives you long-term assurances that like Polkadot and the underlying architecture and the parachains and everything that goes into that it's here to stay, and it's been built in a way that is scalable, that is sustainable long-term. And I think sometimes it can be hard to see past some of the noise that gets created out there, especially on crypto Twitter, which turns into a dumpster fire most of the time. But the amount of like technical building that has gone into this, and we continue to just be amazed by how much really goes into it, that it does give you that long-term, scalability and viability that you should want if you're building an application, period, full stop.
Awesome. And just to take it one step forward in terms of what's different, I think one of the things that that makes it different is the interoperability, the applications utilizing multiple blockchains to basically achieve their use cases in a more optimized way. So would you like to share your thoughts on that as well, like the interoperability aspects of Polkadot? Any order is fine with me. Let's do a random order this time. So Dave, why don't you begin this time?
Sure. I think one of the key ideas behind Polkadot is shared security, and it's something that we as an ecosystem stand on. But when you think about the risks of what can go wrong, and a lot has gone wrong in crypto, if you're a financial institution or an enterprise or somebody who like manages real money, and I'm not saying that crypto isn't real money or whatever, because it's like a huge industry, but crypto folks are like a lot more risk tolerant than I think some of these other folks. you want a platform that's built to be like to have strong security and to have security guarantees. And so again, platform is the baseline. You start to see a lot of primitives be built like Kilt with identity and like a lot of these other things that are really built for enterprises to be able to enter crypto and meaningfully interact. And as we kind of see a shift from like crypto being somewhat of a hobbyist tool to something that is more, I mean, it's becoming mainstream, but I don't think that we're quite there yet. And I think we have a long way to go. I think that there's going to be a flight to safety and Polkadot, and like Polkadot offers that. It also assures that everything that's built on Polkadot shares those same security guarantees. And so it's interoperability, yes, but it's like interoperability under the umbrella that everything is going to work as well as everything else.
Right, just essentially echoing with Dave. So different blockchains of Polkadot interact with one another, exchanging XCMP messages. So those all go under the same security, consensus security umbrella as essentially any other transaction that is happening within any of the parachains. But building with Polkadot is extensible enough that also enables, this is for example, stands in like a core solution of Turn, that we bring light clients and their data on-chain, which enables us to therefore have under the same security umbrella of overlaying relay chain, all of the inclusion proofs that are coming from the different consensus systems. So now what we have running is the bridge between Kusama Polkadot, but already prototyping the Ethereum 2 Lite client, which essentially then enables to using the same, exactly the same kind of approach of moving between different parachains, use then also the same kind of architecture to go beyond the Polkadot onto the different blockchains. And with the palette design where you can hook on multiple different palettes, all of this is doable.
So from my perspective, there are three things that are key differentiators for Polkadot. One is substrate. So the actual framework for building a blockchain is incredibly powerful and I think is going to continue to be utilized more and more. The second is shared security. And so, if you look at the Polkadot roadmap when it rolled out, the first thing to launch was, the substrate platform. The second was the shared security. And so the last thing that is rolling out, it rolled out, 6 months ago, but it's still evolving. I think V3 is coming in the next month, is XCM. And so the ability for these blockchains, obviously, to get shared security, but then also start interacting with the other blockchains who are getting that shared security is unlike anything else in crypto, period. You're able to trust the messages coming across, whether it's just pure asset transfers, which you can do today, and some of the teams in our ecosystem are working with others. So, on something like, Stella Swap or Beam Swap, you can actually use something like A-Star or the tokens that are coming over to be used in DeFi on Moonbeam and vice versa. And so that's one piece. But the second piece that hasn't rolled out quite yet is when you can start using it for general messages to go between those blockchains. And so, you can see something like Centrifuge, who's focusing on real-world assets, being able to take those real-world assets and move them into Moonbeam or another DeFi-focused parachain and start utilizing those in a DeFi ecosystem trustlessly. So, that's like the last big feature for me that's going to launch. I think it's in the next month or so when V3 goes live, where you're gonna be able to kind of see the long-term vision that I think Gav and the original team painted of these blockchains that are not only secure but then natively interoperable from the base layer, that they can do anything together, and then you're going to start to see it scale out. But it's been a bit of a longer road to hoe than I think anyone planned on. But ultimately, those are the things that are going to make Polkadot successful, and you're going to be able to create applications that work natively across blockchains. So you're going to have truly decentralized. Natively decentralized applications from day one that can work across different parachains and blockchains.
It did take a long time, but it also took ETH 5-6 years to migrate to ETH2, and Vitalik was saying 6 months. So greatness takes time.
Nice. So moving on to the next one, I want to understand, like, in your opinion, what are some of the most interesting things happening in the world of Polkadot Dapps today? And let's do random order again. So Nate, you begin.
Sure. So I just touched on one, right? So Centrifuge today, we're getting closer and closer to being able to utilize Moonbeam for messages and assets to kind of flow through. And because Moonbeam and the connection we have back to Ethereum, you can start thinking about ways that it can come through Moonbeam and move on to Ethereum. When you can start accessing more and more liquidity. We have teams that are building natively on Moonbeam that they have kind of a hub and spoke architecture where Moonbeam's kind of the brain for what they're running, but they want to be able to connect to Ethereum, Avalanche, Solana, you name it, some of the other big blockchains, because they realize that for them, in many ways, they want to be able to touch these other ecosystems and expand their total addressable market, but they want it to kind of come back to Moonbeam in some way. And so using general message passing frameworks with folks like Layer 0 or who else am I forgetting, Dave? Multi-chain is another one. Axelar, I don't know why I forgot that. They're working with these folks so that they can have their application run on Moonbeam, but now expand to these other ecosystems and kind of expand their addressable market. And internally to Polkadot, you're going to be able to do that very soon too, using XCM. And internally is even better in my opinion because it's trustless. You're able to do it without any kind of bridge risk, and you're just kind of expanding how you can build applications natively from the start.
So with Gear, we haven't launched yet, so I can't speak quite as, in terms of like what's actually being deployed on Gear. We did have like an internal hackathon recently where we had like 5 or 6 games that were developed in a matter of a few days and deployed. So it's like Gear, I'm excited for some of the gaming applications that'll be possible on Gear and Vara Network, which is kind of our first launch. I am excited with some of the things that I'm seeing in terms of parachains leveraging each other for like functionality. Like I know that Mangata and Oak are doing a pretty cool collab right now. Had to shout it. Where there's like auto compounding of LP positions to maximize yield. And so like taking, it's almost kind of like a modular kind of application where it's like you have one piece of it that's developed on a applicate or like a chain that's optimized for that use case, and kind of cobbling together this unique user experience using lots of different components from different chains. And so I think there's some really cool stuff happening there. On top of Zeitgeist and like prediction markets, and there's just a lot of great stuff to be sort of like excited about in the ecosystem.
Well, my mindset is probably also very much localized. So the kind of the best dApps that I'm seeing in Polkadot, they're very much focused on connectivity, bringing on these additional pieces of infrastructure to make the movement on transaction better, safer, more scalable, and iterating with additional kind of inventions on top of it. There is Manta project, very interesting to see how their privacy is gonna scale in the future. They just did a couple of months ago, I believe, the biggest distribution of the private key. And yeah, I believe like the next kind of iteration that comes on top, assuming that infrastructure is there, interactivity between different parachains and beyond are there. This is just in the settlement kind of layer for the Dapps.
Yeah,
bring on the use cases to pop.
Amazing. And I would also like to add to that part, actually. So some of the dApps, the interesting dApps that I've seen in the ecosystem these days, like building a platform for tracking ethical commodities, like from where they begin and where they are sold, to like asset-based identities, like identifying specific assets on blockchains and then maybe giving them attestations and then credentials. And then there are a few others with respect to like gaming and few and NFTs, of course, like, I've seen some very, very interesting use cases of NFTs coming up on Polkadot now. So there is an entire spectrum of dApps and interesting use cases getting built on Polkadot right now.
Yeah, actually the Astor guys are sitting here, I believe. They're building out some cool use cases with Toyota, I heard, right? The Toyota, Sony. Yeah, I heard. Amazing news lately.
Amazing. Cool. So moving on, in your opinion, if somebody is going to build a dApp today, why they should be building it on Polkadot? And this time, random order, let's start with you, Maciej.
Like the random order. I believe versatility of solutions is a good choice. Obviously, I would say, like, thinking from the user-facing perspective should be a goal. So having a good design of your software and the software decisions that you need to make. Perhaps it does make sense to onboard some of the data into pallets. Perhaps it does make sense to optimize for very constrained computational environment and as smart contracts, and you can do all of it in Polkadot. So this kind of very kind of smart thinking about how to design your application with all of the pieces of architecture that are there. Also, a cool architecture piece, I believe we didn't mention it here. Maybe I can just mention quickly the scheduling of essentially hooks that you can use in the pallets, so you can schedule the transactions that will be executed on any sort of height of the next block that you wish, either on initialize or on finalize, which simply aren't there in the smart contract. So versatility of all of these choices, I believe, make Polkadot a solid choice to build.
Nice.
I'll go. So I think there's a really elegant pathway for a new dApp to launch again in a very kind of low cost way on either a general purpose contract platform or as a parathread or whatever. Obtaining a parachain slot's kind of a two-edged sword. It's it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of building your dApp how you want. You don't have to share block space and all these other things, but the path to getting there's a little bit higher, and you may not want to gamble on something that doesn't yet have product market fit. And so having a deployment lower cost, getting product market fit, getting initial users, and kind of bootstrapping the initial usage, then kind of migrating to a parachain, I think is a really elegant path. The other thing that I want to mention about that is when you get a parachain slot, you've basically leased security for multiple years, which comes at a cost, right? You have to lock up dots, whether you do that yourself or do it through a crowd loan through the community. But along with that, you get lots of attention. You get people that are invested in you that you can do a distribution to and get initial float into the ecosystem. And so I think crowd loans are a really, really cool mechanism that allows you to prepay for security, which then allows you to either have the choice of number one, maybe not having additional inflation for the network, which from a tokenomics and thermodynamic standpoint is actually really good for a nascent young network. Or you can do really interesting kinds of novel token designs, A-Star is doing dApp staking and these kinds of things. It just gives you a lot of flexibility to really kind of craft the solution that's going to provide the experience to an end user that you want to deliver to them. And so I think that pathway and then the flexibility once you get there, all the while building on a platform that's built to last is pretty compelling.
Yeah, I think we're going to be parroting the same thing, but ultimately, for me, it's kind of future-proofing yourself in terms of finding an ecosystem of builders. The folks who've been building in this ecosystem are super committed, are super helpful. I mean, we work with all the different parachain teams in terms of working with each other's code, understanding how it all works, helping out where we can to help teams build, because ultimately, the sum is going to be greater than its parts, and so you're incentivized to be very collaborative in many ways, and so it's a really open ecosystem, I feel like, and so that's one piece. But then the future-proofing yourself in terms of I just think the long-term viability of Polkadot and the ability to provide block space in a secure, scalable manner is going to continue to be needed moving forward. And so you're coming into an ecosystem still early days where I think you can kind of make a mark and start to expand your footprint and have a great place to kind of build for years to come.
Awesome. And one last question. So we are nearing the end of time for this panel. So final question, what do you see for the future of dApps on Polkadot? Like, what do you imagine as use cases and what's going to happen in the next few, let's say, in the short term to medium term? Nate, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So once V3 of XDM comes out, again, I think it's in the next month or so, being able to create an application where the execution may happen on Moonbeam or on Gear, on Turn, but you can start thinking about, okay, well, if I'm an app and I need decentralized identity, okay, great, I can go work with Kilt. If I need access to real-world assets, I can go work with Centrifuge. If I need scheduling, I can go work with Oak. It's kind of this building from the start in a decentralized manner where you have pieces of your application kind of living on different blockchains, doing something specific to the core of that blockchain that provides you kind of a best of breed. That's where I think you're going to see kind of the next couple of years go is using XCM v3 to be able to power that in a trustless manner where you can just use messaging to connect things together so that you can get a better experience for users long term and you can get best of breed technology in the background.
Let me actually talk my own bag a little bit right now. There's a few things that I'm really excited about with Gear's architecture as well as asynchronous backing within Polkadot. So Gear utilizes this thing called the actor model, which is like every smart contract's an individual actor and they update state between each other through passing messages. Okay, fine. What that starts to enable is building applications that are microservices oriented as opposed to sort of more monolithic. And if you look at major tech companies, they've all kind of migrated toward this sort of like microservices oriented infrastructure to have just better performing applications. And so what that starts to unlock is more robust on-chain games, faster and better user experience with DeFi, and just better performance and execution overall. The other thing that I'm really excited for is asynchronous backing with Polkadot, which number one is going to reduce the block times, which frankly is something that's I think going to be a big win for everybody. The other thing that it's going to enable is to allow to kind of package multiple blocks from a parachain into a single Polkadot slot, which means that you can actually achieve, and we've kind of figured this out at Gear, you can achieve on-chain finality and then just like write it to the relay chain. And so it's going to enable like just a lot better performance than what we've traditionally had. And the other thing that I think is pretty interesting with Gear is our sharding technology is going to allow us to also occupy multiple parachain slots. And so you're no longer kind of like limited to, a certain TPS per parachain. You can scale linearly that way. And so, kind of building on one platform and being able to take advantage of that sort of like scale and performance because of the things that Polkadot's enabling, while again, not sacrificing on the core tenets of what we're here for, which is being trustless and credibly neutral and all these other things is going to be pretty exciting.
I would hope just the better iterations on the path that is already in there. Hopefully, like the joint efforts of all of the teams, the parachain teams, but teams in general, it would get us to the point that it doesn't matter which technology you're using. If it's a smart contract, palette, it just matters like the functionality in the user base and then iterating sort of on top of it, having much more structured and localized parachains/blockchains that specialize in one single thing. This one does governance, this one does identity. And I would hope also that these problems that we saw the last years, which like really were in the fact of the problems with crypto, all of the mismanagements that were happening with centralized exchanges, these weren't really the problems with crypto itself. It was just that where the crypto is now, it's just much more convenient to use the centralized exchanges because they're faster, they bring on much more volume. But then when you want to ramp off out of these centralized exchanges, then you're going back to the blockchain again, and you still have the same kind of problems because you need to verify again sometimes. Perhaps the blockchains that specialize in identity could cover this. And as we iterate more and more and more, not only within Polkadot, but in the blockchain space in general, like hopefully all of the functionalities that now users would choose to go for centralized exchanges, like these arguments or functionality wouldn't be there, but simply all of the arguments are then accessible via the centralized technology.
Amazing. Awesome. So that's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing their thoughts, and thank you all for listening. We did not have the time for Q&A, but we are here. If you have any questions, come find us, and we'll be happy to chat with you. Thank you, everyone.